Welcome live. Well, depending on when you're watching or listening, or how you're watching and listening, to the hashtag Let's Get Louder LMF's podcast. I am Chase Blake, the Loud Miami fan, and I'm here for a special edition. This may be a quick episode, maybe 2 to 10 minutes, but it's time to get louder because Tim Anderson, the former All Star shortstop of the Chicago White Sox, is now a Miami Marlin. Breaking news this morning from, I think, Jessica Rogers or something to that effect from ESPN. Give the credit where it's due. It was then picked up by every national media. Tim Anderson signs a 1-year deal with our Miami Marlins. The South Florida baseball team has signed a free agent, a big name free agent, one that did not produce in 2023. We saw it live. And unfortunately, he saw some mistakes. But Tim Anderson of the Chicago White Sox of 23 was not the same Tim Anderson that the league or general fans of the League of Baseball were used to seeing. I have a lot of Chicago White Sox fans. They believe it was just the attitude, the culture, the depressing nature of that locker room and the way that team played last year that made it impossible for any of the teams really to be upbeat for the full season. With that being said, what does this mean for our Miami Marlins? Well, this starts a ripple effect. If you listen to the first episode of this season, please go back, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. Appreciate y'all, and follow me at Loud Marlins Fan. If you go back to the episode I recorded just a few days ago, you'll hear my thoughts on how we as a team should progress this season. But what this means for the Marlins, we now have a shortstop. And on my last episode, we didn't. We were going to piece together the shortstop position, let's say with Vidal Brujan, who we traded for. He's not a proven entity. John Birdie was the best on the roster. They picked up Nick Gordon and Xavier Edwards. Jacob Amaya is somewhere in there, but I don't think he's ready to come up yet. So Tim Anderson fills that void at shortstop, and that's great. We have it, but he has to produce. He did not last year. I'm pulling it up on my phone right now, his stats, so I could go over them. Thanks to Google. Tim Anderson, let's type it in. And Tim Anderson last season hit 245. Not horrible, not great. 1 home run. That's un-Tim Anderson-like. He had 25 RBIs and 121 hits. Well, that's not his normal numbers. As just the year prior in 2022, it was an injury-prone all-star season. He played 79 games, and he had how many home runs? 6 home runs. He had 17 home runs in 2021. 10 home runs in 2020. Let's go to 2019, 18 home runs. So he's a 2-time All-Star in 21 and 22. Something fell off in 2023. He hit 30. I don't think it was his age. It was really, my belief, the mentality of that team. There was also, is he a head case? Is he egomaniac? Is he a bad influencer in the locker room or whatnot? And a former player with him, guy I like and trust, Jake Berger, our third baseman, DH first base, he now going into his first full season as a Marlin, spoke very highly of Tim Anderson. And we reviewed that just a little bit on last episode. But everything's coming to fruition here. The Miami Marlins now have a starting shortstop, an actual starting shortstop. We didn't have this in 2023. Now we do in 2024. What do you mean you didn't have a starting shortstop, Chase? Well, be honest with you, they had Joey Wendell, and he did not have a good season in 23. We all were screaming for him not to play. John Birdie had to step in that role, either by injury or performance. Xavier Edwards had to step into that role, whether it was his position or not. He only had, I think he played maybe one or a couple innings at shortstop. Then you really only had Birdie as your full time short. So now you have an actual shortstop replacing Joey Wendell, makes this team better. Lets Birdie, if he's still a Marlin, and that's one of these things that could happen because of the ripple effect. Oh, by the way, I'm getting messages. Why are you in a birthday hat? Well, today is my 38th birthday. So thank you, Miami Marlins, for giving me the birthday gift of Tim Anderson on my birthday and the sign. Okay, so back to what this means for the team. What this means for the team is they have to make decisions. What do those decisions look like? Well, now you have a full roster, a huge full roster of outfielders and infielders and players, utility players who can play multiple positions. Well, from what the Fish on First team, again, go super subscribe to them at fishonfirst.com. Great Marlins content if you're a Miami Marlin fan and haven't heard of them yet, you need to because they have a great group of young, outstanding, up and coming reporters, and they are the future of that business. But they're starting with the Marlins, and it's great. They've been up for many years. So go to Fish on First, and what they have been reporting is uh, that the void has been filled, but what comes next? And that can be a trade for John Birdie. They're not reporting a trade; they're reporting options of what happens because John Birdie's making 3 million or 3.5 million this year, and you just signed Tim Anderson for 5 million. That's $8 million to fill a utility and shortstop role. That money can be used elsewhere. But we'll see what happens. You got to trust Bendix. You have Nick Gordon, you have Jesus Sanchez, you have Brian De La Cruz, you have Jazz Chisholm Jr., who's definitely not moving back to shortstop now. He is your center fielder moving forward for many, many years to come, at least 2 or 3. And Luis Arise is your second baseman. You have Josh Bell as your first baseman. So you really have a full roster here. If you look at Trey Mancini, he signed a minor league deal to make the roster for opening day as your backup first baseman. He will be the backup first baseman. He will make the roster. Vidal Brujan signed as a shortstop infielder or traded for him as an infielder. And he has not performed in the majors, and he did not have such a great Dominican league during the winter leagues. So we'll see if he even makes the team. They think, I think it was Eli Sussman of Fish on First on their spaces that I just got off of. He even said, he's like, look, if he gets DFA'd, he may clear waivers and just be placed as a non 40-man roster guy in AAA. They could always bring him back in, but the corresponding move to sign Tim Anderson, as they've reported, will probably be moving Sandy to the IL because obviously he's out for the season with Tommy John surgery. So it's really, we're going to have a lot to watch this spring, and I'm excited for it. And I've said on the Locked On Marlins podcast with Peter Pratt, again, another group you should follow, or another podcast you should follow, or YouTube channel. Definitely try to go there. But Peter Pratt, and I've said it to him, I'm excited for the battles this offseason. Someone is going to have to step up now to make the team. Avisail Garcia, again, Fish on First on their weekly special or weekly Marlins talk on their YouTube. They were very clear about how Avisail Garcia has totally changed his approach this offseason. He actually worked with our batting champion, Luis Arise, here to change his stance. And I look forward to seeing it. Look, you're paying the guy $12.5 million. You want him to perform. You don't want that to have to be dead money if you DFA him. I expect Trey Mancini, as formerly mentioned, to make this team as the backup first baseman. Now, you have a ton of players who can play the infield who may be ready. I liked Xavier Edwards. He showed a lot at the end of last season. He showed a lot of what he can do. So maybe he will make this team. but he still has options. Brian De La Cruz, he had hit 19 home runs last season. He will only grow on that, you hope, not go backwards. So you really have a full stack team, and you have to have your relief pitchers. I never really discussed relief pitchers, but we have plenty of them. Andrew Nardi, Tanner Scott, Simpson is someone to look at in this spring, and he's supposed to make the team in their bullpen. You have Brazoban, who kind of struggled down the stretch last year because he was worn out. So you have to fill that relief pitching area, but you can't take too much away from the positional players. So there's a mix and medium here. That's going to be fun to watch. Who will make this team? Uh, they talked about Tristan Gray having a great first day of spring training. He another non roster invite minor league signing. Tristan Gray can make this team, but the Tim Anderson signing, which is what this podcast is about, the Tim Anderson signing only throws more into that because you're getting more talent on this team. They didn't sign Ahmad Rosario, who Rosario signed with Tampa Bay for $1.5 million. They didn't go the cheap route. They went the all-star route. They spent money to get Tim Anderson. They outbid, it appears on Yahoo Sports, an article I just read, they outbid the Angels who were in on him and a couple other teams to get Tim Anderson in a Miami Marlins uniform. So again, this only makes us better. You just hope that what we saw on national media, and they make a big spectacle about everything, you hope the Tim Anderson that we're getting is closer to the performance of the Tim Anderson I mentioned from 21 and 22, even as far back as 2018. We'll see. But you hope you're not getting the guy who got in a fight last year and got knocked out in that fight on the field. So depending on the one that we get, that's the one that will make all the difference. And you hope you get the Tim Anderson who performs, who helps this team. Skip is going to show his management skills here. You got a lot of egos and heads now in that locker room. Tim Anderson being one of them. Jazz Chisholm Jr. There's no one with a bigger ego than Jazz Chisholm because he knows his potential to be the greatest center fielder in the game. So you have multiple players, multiple egos, and it's up to the management and staff to control that clubhouse. Last year, Joey Wendell was a leader in the clubhouse. Joey Wendell's gone. You need to see who steps up in his place as far as the positional players spot. I got to assume that Josh Bell and Jake Berger, the big ballers, they're going to be there. Jazz has been here for years. There's no Miguel Rojas anymore in there. There's no 5-year tenured players. There's no Cooper anymore, Garrett Cooper. This is who you have. And it's up to the management and staff, and they did a wonderful job last year doing it, to bring Tim Anderson into this culture that is Miami baseball, a winning culture, not the culture the previous ownership or regime, not the culture of Derek Jeter, but the culture of what Kim Ng should be credited for starting last year into what is now Peter Bendick's team and Skip Schumacher, and hopefully they extend him too, as he has a team option next year to pick up, which I believe they will. But it's his responsibility now to bring this team together and have them mesh. And hopefully we win as many one-run games if we need to, but hopefully we're winning games by more, scoring more runs. The loss of Jorge Soler hurts. This bringing in Tim Anderson, if he can hit 10 to 20 home runs, that's going to add to the loss, or add to the numbers to make up for the loss of Jorge Soler. So I'm all in. I'm very happy Tim Anderson was signed. From a fan perspective, I hope to see many of you who are watching, if you live in South Florida, down at Lone Depot Park. They deserve you out there. I don't want to hear anymore. The ownership doesn't want to spend money. They are allocating funds to players who they believe in. And in this case, it's Tim Anderson. He is the first and only so far major league signing. $5 million. That brings the opening day roster more than it was last year. The fish on first, I'll always throw it at them because I trust them and I believe in them. They made a case, Eli Sussman and team, that the Marlins spent $92 million last season. Before this signing, without any corresponding moves, they were at 90 million, so 2 million left. And now, with this signing, they are at $95 million, so 3 million over last year. If you look at player versus player, you're opening. Let's go, and we'll do. This will lead into the next episode that we'll do, or one of the next episodes we'll do with comparing the 23 to 24 roster as we get closer to the season, so I can kind of see who's making the team and who's not. But if you just short here with this adding an addition of Tim Anderson in third base last year. It was Gene Segura. That didn't work out. He was cut and released after the trade to Cleveland for Josh Bell. So last year you had Gene Segura. Now at third you have Jake Berger. At shortstop you have Tim Anderson instead of Joey Wendell. At second, Luis Arraez is your second baseman both seasons. At first base now you have Josh Bell instead of Garrett Cooper. At catcher, you'll probably have Christian Bethancourt being the starter, and that's great. And you'll probably have Fortes stepping in or whatnot, and that's your infield. So a little bit different instead of Jacob Stallings last season. Yeah, that's a lot different than last year's opening day infield lineup. In the outfield, it kind of stays the same. Depending on who makes right field. Left field, DLC was your opening day starter. Your center fielder, Jazz Chisholm, and he now has a full season, 97 games he played last year of center field baseball in the major leagues, and he only got better as the season went on. You also have in right field, last year opening day was Avisail Garcia. We have to see if he makes the team, if he's the DH for the team, or where they position him on the team. But that, depending, it could be Jesus Sanchez starting in right. It could be Nick Gordon starting in right. We don't know until opening day. But if you compare last year's opening day positional player roster to this one, this year is a lot better. And they're in the same price range if they don't make any corresponding trades or moves. So you got to be happy with that. And of course, the pitchers going to be different. Sandy Alcantara has started, I think, 3 or 4 straight opening days for the Marlins. He's not on this active roster this year due to the Tommy John. So you may have Jesus Luzardo, a lefty, starting. You may have Yuri Perez starting. You may doubt Brax is going to start opening day, but the battle's going to be probably between those two guys. So opening day is just a month away. About we're February 22nd. Happy birthday to me. And first opening day spring training game is on Saturday we'll say St. Louis, even though they both share the home. You have Ryan Weathers. He could be a starter. But again, back to the Tim Anderson. We are happy as fans. This is what we wanted. We wanted a big name free agent signing, and he is and was the last big name shortstop left. They outbid other teams, which is rare for this team to do. So they've allocated the money, as Peter Bendix has said, as Sherman has said. I was not told not to spend money. That's what Bendix said to the fans, whether he's lying or not. He said, "I'm waiting, and I am going to sign players if we choose to make this team better." And this one definitely makes this team better. So with that being said, I'll end that here. Thank you for listening to this special edition of the hashtag Let's Get Louder LMF's podcast. Whether you're streaming on YouTube, whether you're listening on any of the podcast networks, Apple, Spotify, multiple others. Just search hashtag Let's Get Louder. It'll probably pop up. And I am the loud Miami fan, Chase Blake. I appreciate you. And if you ever need a loud Marlin fan to join your podcast, please just send me a request. We'll work it out. Let's get louder together. And this season is all about hashtag raising the decibel. Follow me at Loud Miami Fan. We'll talk soon. Let's frickin' go.